Hi everyone, Professor Snart checking in as we leave Unit 7, the completing a poem assignment, and actually go into Unit 8, which is our next or second workshop unit. There was some really great work for Unit 7. I think maybe people were finding that that completing a poem idea is sort of a fun exercise in terms of being an attentive reader, which, like I said in the unit, is actually one of those fundamental components of being a good writer. I think one of the misconceptions that people sometimes have is that to be a good writer, you actually don't want to read too much other stuff because you'll be influenced or somehow your mind will be filled with that instead of original ideas. But fundamentally, the opposite is true. The more you're reading and sort of filling your mind with that kind of those kind of ideas or that kind of use of language, whether it's good writing or bad, honestly, sometimes both of those can be as effective. But just being an attentive reader can really be helpful, and again, is sort of crucial actually to being a good writer. So the completing a poem exercise is useful for kind of heightening our abilities as a reader. But it has some other consequences as well. First of all, it's good to keep in mind it's just a really good cure for writer's block, which we all run into sooner or later. And so we stare at that blank screen or that blank piece of paper, and we just can't seem to get over that blank space. Just doing the exercise of finding a piece of text, it almost doesn't matter what it is, and trying to complete it, or like with this assignment, we were flexible as far as just adding to it. That exercise can really sometimes spark something more originally creative in you. So it's not that you would sit down to write a poem by doing this exercise and then the poem you complete would somehow work on its own, because obviously it's derived so directly from something else. But you might be surprised at how that exercise can be the step to get over something like writer's block, which can really be paralyzing for a lot of people. So that's good to keep in mind. The other interesting sort of effect that the completing a poem exercise has on us or for us is that oftentimes it kind of bumps us out of our own writerly habits, and everybody has them. And they're all just sort of elements of our style, even if we don't think about them. Whether we always tend to rhyme or not rhyme, or write about a certain subject, or use a certain kind of imagery, we fall into patterns. And if we don't become aware of those, you can really sort of stagnate as a writer. Even if you're producing a lot of work, it's actually just sort of reproducing the same poem over and over again. So the completing a poem assignment is really good for sort of dislodging us from some of those habits, because we're really working to write consciously in somebody else's style, which, again, one of the sort of paradoxes is that in becoming more attuned to another person's style, we can actually develop and become much more attuned to our own style, especially if your style isn't really something that you've thought of in any great degree of precision before. You sort of know, well, my style is, I like short poems. We really want to know more about our own particular style, or really our own particular habits as writers. So the completing a poem exercise can be really good for just getting us out of some of those habits that we've become so used to we're not even really aware of anymore. So keep that in mind, and don't let this just be a one-off kind of thing that you do for the class and then never return to. So there's lots of lessons to be gained from this fairly simple and straightforward exercise. First of all, avid reading and attentive reading for things like not just content, like what's going on in the story, but style, tone, word choice, all of those elements of craft that we've really tried to focus on. How are those operating for good or for bad, honestly, in every piece of writing and every piece of text that you can run into? How would you write in that style? Does it bring to light some of your tendencies that maybe you need to play up because they're positive, or get yourself out of because there's such an ingrained habit? It's almost like a knee-jerk reaction or default choices you make because it's just so subconscious or unconscious almost. And again, if you run into that writer's block issue, this is a great exercise for letting really somebody else get the ball rolling as far as what's going on in a poem, and then you can just sort of jump in, and what you produce is probably not a poem that you would submit for publication, but is a first step towards getting out of some of those habits where we stagnate, and then that sort of leads to writer's block. So it's all sort of the same ball of wax. Okay, so we move into Unit 8, which is our second workshop. So it's set up more or less the same way. The groups are a little bit different just given our class makeup at this point. So you'll see that there's two slightly larger groups so that we can hopefully get a little more feedback, more substantial feedback to each individual in the group. Technically, things are pretty much the same. I'm asking you to maybe reread the whole rules of poetry idea, reread the what is a workshop, so we have the technical aspect right. You're submitting your work as a file. You're giving feedback to the people as a sort of reply within the discussion board. Everything should be pretty straightforward at this point. If you run into technical problems, by all means, just be in touch with me. But again, we have, let me just click in here. The other piece of the puzzle to note is the two separate due dates that work for our workshop units. So of course there's the first date where you're submitting your poem as a file, and then there's the second date where you're providing feedback to your group. So the first due date is Sunday, October 9th, this coming Sunday, and then you are providing feedback to everybody that submitted on time, and you can be sort of generous and maybe check in on Monday to see if there's other people that didn't submit on the Sunday to see if there's work that you could respond to. So you're providing those responses by Wednesday, October 12th. Okay, so hopefully we can get a little more substantial response from people, again paying attention to more than just what they feel about the poem or even the sort of meaning, the big meaning of the poem. Those can be part of your response, but again, try to attend to elements of craft, choices that the writer has made, and asking why make those choices? Are they the best? Are short lines the best choice? Why break the line here? And quote directly from the work that you're reading so that the person getting that feedback can really focus on a particular part of the poem, not just be sort of searching and guessing about, well, where is it confusing, or exactly why, or whatever. So you really want to be pretty generous in that feedback. And it's the golden rule, right? The same sort of investment that you would like other people to put into your work as far as giving you feedback, you want to put into the feedback that you're giving to them too. So pretty straightforward. So that's it. The technical part should be pretty familiar by this point. The two due dates is a little bit different, but again, same as the earlier workshop. And if you have any questions, just be in touch with me. Otherwise, I'll talk to everybody soon.